member of UCAN. Thank you all again for being here. We appreciate you taking your time out of your day to show support, not only for these victims that we're going to talk about, but also advocating for nonviolence in our communities in our entire Douglas County. We're going to begin by having Pastor Gilbert please step up, and he will lead us in invocation for this event and for the meal. Thank you, sir.
Let's pray. Lord, I'm so grateful today for this organization, for its mission, for the important work that it does in addressing violence in our community and beyond. I thank you for each person here who's taking the time not only today to be advocates, but in our lives we advocate for nonviolence. And we work toward that day when love can just make a bigger impact on our community and far beyond. Lord, I thank you for each person who makes himself available in all the different ways for every single effort, whether big or small. Give us the courage to do what we do. Remind us of the importance of it. Fill us with your love and bless this time together as we share this meal and this important program and hear this message in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor. We are now going to move on to the presentation of the silhouettes. If I could have the two speakers, Kelly Wenzel and Chief Scott Camp.
Good afternoon. I'm Kelly Wenzel, a member of UCAN. Thank you for coming today to show your support and commitment as a member of our community to end violence in our homes, in our relationships, and in our lives. For over 40 years, Violence Free Minnesota has published an intimate partner homicide report. This is a summary of the Minnesota women, men, and children who have been murdered as a result of relationship abuse, where there has been domestic abuse and often child abuse. This report highlights the immense impact the loss of life has had on our communities. Soon, you will see 30 silhouettes, each one representing and honoring the life of a person who was killed in 2020 because of the egregious crime of domestic violence. The opportunity for these individuals to grow their families, deepen their friendships, follow their dreams, and continue making memories with loved ones was stolen from them. Imagine the lifetime of grief faced by the family members and loved ones of these victims. On my left, you will also see a t-shirt display on a clothesline. These are t-shirts lovingly created by victims' families and others that recognize and pay tribute to the women, men, friends, and family members who were murdered in 2020. When you leave today, I encourage you to take a moment to read stories of the lives of these victims. On my right, you will see one solitary candle burning. This represents the lives of 30 victims, our daughters and sons, our grandchildren, our mothers and fathers, our grandparents, our sisters and brothers, our husbands, our wives, our partners, our family members, our friends, our co-workers, our neighbors, our fellow Minnesotans who have lost their lives at the hand of another person they trusted, possibly by gunshot, strangulation, suffocation, or stabbing. At least 20 minor children were left without a parent due to intimate partner homicide this year. We acknowledge each precious child's life with this tiny teddy bear as a symbol of their lost innocence and trust that the world is a safe place.
Joseph Abraham McRonald, February 15, age 39, Minneapolis, stabbed by his girlfriend. Abigail Denise Simpson, February 26, age 21, St. Paul, beaten and stabbed by her boyfriend.
Monique Soraya Robbins, February 26, age 28, St. Paul, strangled by her boyfriend. Jackie Ann Defoe, and her son, Kevin Lee Shabash Jr., March 7th, age 27 and pregnant, and age 20 months. Okay. Stabbed by her boyfriend and died due to blunt force injuries sustained by his mother's boyfriend.
Yang Lu, March 10th, age 40, Maple Grove, shot by her husband. Pauline Holman, March 10th, age 58, Minneapolis, stabbed by her boyfriend.
Brandon Joseph Nieves, April 2nd, age 20, South St. Paul, shot by his girlfriend's ex. Kevin Logan Jr., April 19th, age 31, Maple Grove, shot by his children's mother's boyfriend.
Patricia Ann Valley, April 29th, age 65, Ham Lake, shot by her husband. Maria Fernanda Bliss Pugh, May 2nd, age 28, Maple Grove, strangled by her husband.
Genevieve Marie Scooge, May 22nd, age 26, Bloomington, died due to blunt force injuries sustained by her date. Ochea Shea Brown, May 29th, age 28, Minneapolis, died after her boyfriend beat her, ran her over with a car, and dragging her underneath.
Ashley Corin Johnson, June 3rd, 29 and pregnant, St. Paul, shot by the father of her unborn child. Richard Olag Stephen, June 3rd, age 33, Moorhead, beaten while trying to intervene in his girlfriend's assault, later dying from the injuries.
Brandon Jerome Salter, June 4th, age 27, Minneapolis, shot by his sister's ex-boyfriend. Lanisha Helen Columbus and her daughter Lanisha Liddell Columbus, July 5th, age 27 and age 4 weeks, Minneapolis. Lanisha was shot by the father of her child, and 4 weeks later, her daughter Lanisha died after being delivered early and spending 4 weeks in intensive care.
Carla Eugenie Wright, July 10th, age 72, Dakota, stabbed by her husband. Yulei Court, August 17th, age 47, Blaine, shot by her husband.
Angela Lynn Masich, August 30th, age 47, Bloomington, shot by her husband. Lauren Summer Kofi Nagesson, September 4th, age 22, West St. Paul, shot by her boyfriend.
Kiona Sade Foote and her daughter Iona Zayla Miller, September 10th, age 23 and pregnant, and age 2, Rochester, strangled by her ex-boyfriend, died as a result of trauma sustained by her mother's ex. Nigar Mamadizada, November 12th, age 29, Crystal, shot by her ex-boyfriend.
Kim Leanne Theng, November 17th, age 53, Minneapolis, died due to blunt force injuries sustained by her boyfriend. Loretta J. Billman, November 30th, age 62, Grand Lake Township, shot by her boyfriend.
Encarnacion Gutierrez Quickson, December 2nd, age 47, Ashby, died due to blunt force injuries sustained by her boyfriend. Julio Cesar Guadalupe Rodriguez, December 15th, age 15, Austin, stabbed by his mother's boyfriend. Todd Anthony Grillman, December 21st, age 56, St. Paul, shot by his friend's boyfriend.
I call your attention once again to the lone solitary candle burning in front of you. The extinguishing of this light will symbolize the end of the lives of these victims who are gone forever. Let's refuse to not only remember them today, but rather remember their stories and their memories so they become our hope for tomorrow to ignite the sparks of change. Let us take a moment of silence to honor each and every one of these individuals. By all of us working together, let me repeat myself, by all of us working together, we shed light, we illuminate the problem and the crime of domestic assault. We become the catalyst for change. To achieve a peaceful, thriving community where domestic violence is a distant nightmare means we need to be a part of the solution and create a community of shared responsibility. We are only as safe as those around us. No one is immune to intimate partner violence. Let us unite, let us work together, let us create a world where we can all live free without violence in Alexandria, Douglas County, Minnesota, and in our world. All of us together can bring hope and can bring light. Thank you.
Thank you all again, once again, for taking the time to be a part of that. Thank you to Kelly and Chief Kent for reading those names and all those that carry the silhouettes. At this point, we're working between meals served. While we're doing so, I will bring up retired Chief Chuck Nettestead, current Mayor Bobby Osterberg is sitting under the weather today, so she's not able to attend to give out the Mayor's Peace Award.
It's good to see you all here today. I'm happy to be filling in for Mayor Osterberg. It's no mystery this year who's going to be winning the prize, because I'm going to get his name off right away. Kelly took leadership with UCAN from first joining. She leads the marketing and public relations for UCAN and plays an active role in the annual often enlisting her husband and son. She also serves as a community agent and outreach coordinator for legal services in Northwest Minnesota. Originally, she began as a front desk, being the first face of kindness and compassion when someone struggled. Anyone who knows Kelly loves her beautiful heart and generous disposition. Many people know her for her supportive spirit and many children's swimming lessons when she worked for the Lakes area Iraq. We'd like to have Kelly Luncheon please come up. And I just want to say on a personal note, UCAN is in very good hands when we have young people like Kelly getting involved and being part of UCAN in a very active and passionate way. So thank you, Kelly, for all you're doing and keep up the good work.
Limit boys and men's full potential. Peng has done numerous keynotes, trainings, and technical assistances to diverse local, national, and international organizations and communities on the intersections of gender-based violence, manhood, and masculinity. He coordinates the statewide engagement of the Men and Masculine Folks Network, a collaborative network of many community organizations, community groups, and individuals across Minnesota. Peng is the founder and executive director of Man Forward, a national Southeast Asian men and masculine grassroots group that uses community organization to activate men, boys, and masculine folks to practice new forms and concepts of masculinity and manhood. In all of these roles, Peng deeply believes that healing is an essential part of the work in transformative justice. So as a healer doing mental wellness work, Peng supports and works with LGBTQ and gender nonconforming youth, families, couples, and men who have committed gender-based violence. Lastly, he is a past trustee on the Minnesota Women's Foundation, is a 2018 Bush Leadership Fellow, and 2019 Rockwood Leadership Institute, Leading from the Inside Out Fellow. If you would join me in welcoming Peng Tao.
Thanks, UCAN, for inviting me to speak at this luncheon and really talk about what it means to actually engage men and boys in particular, and how do we actually build spaces where men and boys and masculine identified people can actually really think about prevention. Because it really starts there, and I think that a lot of what we think about is like coming to these events for us as men, or wearing white ribbons for our folks in Canada with the White Ribbon Campaign. We think about those things, and we think about walking a mile in our shoe as events that we can attend, and those are all great things that we can actually do as men and boys to actually end domestic violence and sexual violence. But there's actually a deeper piece that we actually have to look at, and that's what I'm going to be focusing my talk on today. That it's really important, over the years that I've learned, that it's so much important for me to actually unlayer some of the unhealthy things that have been taught to me as I was growing up as a boy, and then into manhood, to how to practice healthy masculinity. So that's really what I'm going to be sharing. Just to get the lay of the foundation down a little bit is that we're really living in a society and in communities where we really, I think, not so much as it used to be, but it used to be where we used to always value boys and men, right, for what they can do because they're strong and they're mobile and they're agile and they're leaders and they can be leaders and they can be tough and they can actually make decisions on point. And we still, I think, in some ways hold those deep, rigid ideas about what it means to be boys and what it means to be men in our own communities and in our own ways and in our own thinking. And why I say that is because when I work with men who cause violence, and who are sent to sex offender treatment programs or are sent to domestic violence programming, that is actually what they share with us. They share that after we have looked at all the ways in which they were thinking and all the ways in which they're behaving, at the end of it, they share the values about those teachings of that socialization of what it means to be a man and what it means to be a boy in that age. And then you have to interpret those things for yourself, right? And I think about the story of my young boy, who's 9 now. And then when he was growing up, and if I didn't know what I knew, right, I would, when he started throwing things and he was getting pissed off and he started throwing his toys across the room at age 3, I would have been like, oh, he's just a boy, let him be a boy, right? But because of what I knew, I had to actually sit him down and I actually had to talk to him and and I actually had to say, hey, you actually know how to use your words, and you actually know how to use and tell us your feelings, so please share your feelings instead of throwing things across the room, right? And I think that that's what happens, is that one of the best and most used examples is that we often use examples of being able to shut boys down at a very early age when they start expressing their emotions, right? And that the only emotion that they can actually express is anger. And anger doesn't cause domestic violence, okay? Let's be clear about that, because we send a lot of folks to domestic violence or anger management program, but that doesn't actually end the violence that actually happens. So as advocates who have been doing this work for a very long time, we're very clear that domestic violence is not caused by anger, or is not caused by alcohol either, or other drugs. Those can play factors into it, but it's definitely not that. And what we know to be true is that there is actually some invisible or form of way in which we teach our men and boys to actually be with one another. I was on my way to Las Vegas for a convention there, and I was on the plane, and there's nothing to do on the plane other than watch TV, right? And that's on my only downtime, oftentimes, is to be able to catch up on things. And so I was watching this sitcom called The Neighbors, if any of you have seen it on CBS. And the white neighbor, it's about these two neighbors, this one white guy and this one black guy, and they live next door to each other. And the white guy's like, hey, I'll come over and paint the house, because the black neighbor's wife was like, she wants the house repainted, right? And the black guy is like, the black neighbor's like, I don't want to do it, I'll do it myself, I don't want to hire anybody. She goes over, she talks to the white neighbor, and the white guy, and the white neighbor's like, I want to come, why don't I offer myself? Because I'm a great painter, I love painting houses, I'll come over, okay. Comes over, starts painting the house, she agrees to it, starts painting. The black neighbor doesn't know that he came over and he's painting, and it's like, at all at this paint job that's been done so far. Then he finds out that it's actually his white neighbor's paint job, and he's like, what the hell are you doing, right? You just violated the man code and the bro code. That's what I'm talking about, okay? So it reminds me of that, and I think that that's what I want to share with all of you, is that there are some ways in which, through that self-socialization process, and through that, the way in which we teach our men and boys, but unintentionally, right? None of these is done by intention. Unintentionally, in terms of how we prep them up to be men in our society, what happens is that then they live by these invisible rules of how, like, I don't go into your yard, you don't come into mine, you stay in your lane, just as the black neighbor was telling his white neighbor, like, you shouldn't come over and paint my house because I need to be doing that myself, and how dare you do that, right? And that he's actually in charge of his own domain, his own house, right? And we shouldn't interfere and intervene, which plays a key role in how domestic violence actually happens, is that we teach men to not interfere when domestic violence actually happens, right? We teach men not to hit. Everybody knows that, so we don't teach them that in the domestic violence programming. We don't go like, you shouldn't hit women and girls, right? Because they all know that. The question becomes, how did you get to that point, and how did you arrive at that decision? Okay. So what I say that because part of the normalization to any men in my engagement of talking with men and boys and creating spaces for men and boys in our community is to sort of say that we're all actually in this together, and I think Kelly said it really well earlier on, is that it takes all of us to actually end the violence that we're actually seeing towards women and girls, right? And the violence that actually happens in our homes. And especially, it's critical for us as men and boys to actually be able to talk to one another and actually intervene when the violence actually happens, right? Not to say that it doesn't happen, that intervention doesn't happen, it does happen. But it doesn't happen at the rate that we need it to happen. It doesn't happen at the pace and at the kind of awareness and visibility that we need it to actually happen, right? Because of this bro code and man code say, stay in your lane, this is my house, this is my domain, this is my wife. I get to say, I get to do what I want to do, right? So we set up conditions in the environment that allow for the violence to actually happen, right? And for the violence to actually be accepted. And many of our boys' lives are actually socialize with violence, and for boys to actually normalize violence, right? I was sharing earlier at the tech earlier this morning that it's about the horrific, gory, and the violent movies and video games. All of that help minimize and naturalize, quote unquote, and make natural violence in the lives of men and boys. So that choice becomes a low-bearing fruit. The choice to harm another person becomes a low-bearing fruit. Okay? That when he gets to the place where he's like, I have to figure it out myself, right? I've lost all support systems. People turn their backs on me, and I'm gonna have to figure it out myself. I'm gonna do what men are supposed to do. Okay? And what men are supposed to do is what men do. And oftentimes that results in harm. And I can't tell you enough how many stories of men that I've sat with and talked to that have shared that in their darkest moments and places. They turn to things that they don't think that is harmful. They do things that they don't think that anybody's paying attention to, that's gonna cause anybody harm, like hiring a woman off the street to have sex with them, or watching too much pornography in his own room, and then all of a sudden he bumps into child pornography and his own values. He doesn't believe in child pornography, or doesn't believe that he should have sex with young people, but then all of a sudden he starts watching child pornography, and after a few watches, he tells himself it's okay for me because younger women are attracted to older men, and it's okay because society accepts that older men can be with younger women. That's what we're dealing with. Okay. And who are those men? Those are the same men that is in this room, like myself. And so I always say to men, what makes me different than the man who killed his wife? What's the difference? There's actually no difference. I'm just one choice away, one footprint away from that man. Just one choice. One choice away. I just didn't make that choice. But every day throughout my life, and every day I have an opportunity, just like every man and every boy, to cause harm. And that harm then be okay, right? Such as the boys, I remember a few years ago, out in Pennsylvania or somewhere out there, but there's been a couple cases where we've seen rape happen, and the community comes out and says, let's not ruin these boys' lives. What does that say about victimization to people who experience violence? What does that say? That says it is on her, it is on the person who's experienced the harm to stop the harm. And then it also teaches boys and men, it's okay to keep harming because all they'll do for you is slap your wrist, don't do it again, and you'll be okay. Right? And so like I shared this morning in sexual violence cases, we've created places and spaces where victims and survivors continuously have to think about defending themselves when they come out and talk about the violence that they've experienced because of the climate that we've created and the conditions and the environment that we've created. And all of us participate in that. All of us participate in that. Right? So whether I am the man who killed his wife or I'm not the man who killed his wife, I participate in that as well too. The direct connection is we created a climate of fear where women and girls are afraid of men. One of my colleagues said to me a couple years ago, we went to do a training down in New Mexico with some of these folks down there, and that was the first night in her entire life she said she feels safe. Okay? Not because she was with me, partially part of that, but she's like, I've never been in a room with another man and feel safe. And she does this work. Another story, a woman was driving home, and she lives in the suburbs. She comes home and tells her husband, I think you should give me some pepper spray. And he's like, what? We live in a good neighborhood. Nothing will happen here. And then he thinks about the conversations that he's had with other men and conversations around violence. Starts to see it in an environment, right? Starts to see like that when every time she goes jogging, the way that other men look at her, right? All of that teaches women that they need to stay safe. And all the places, the domestic violence advocacy agencies that we have, or the sexual violence agencies that we have, in the past used to, and in some ways we still do, like teach women how to defend themselves, right? We teach women how to do that and how to protect themselves, go to a violated area, call somebody else. But the conversation really needs to be about men and boys and how we participate in all of that and creating and setting up that environment, right? Even if we are so well-intentioned, and even if we are good men, right? My challenge always to men is, can we be better than just good? Or are we just good at being good, right? Because we know that so much, and so many of us are actually good. But the 5 and 10% that actually do the killing and the harming in our communities and in our society, they have the loudest voice at this moment. All of these folks know that. Through their stories and through their lives, we know that. Right? So we have a strong responsibility and we have a strong accountability in actually stopping it. And we also know that there's actually like real radical hope that the lives of men and boys can actually be transformed through a healing and through creating spaces, right? So some of you may be thinking like, what the hell? All of a sudden we got to this place, you may be feeling a little bit guilty, a little bit shameful for some of the brothers and men in the room, you know, and you may be like, well, that's not me, right? And then the phrase always comes up like, not all men do this. We get that all the time as advocates. And frankly, that's true. It's not all men. But what happens is that all men actually benefit from the violence that actually happens, and that's what we're talking about. Right? All men benefit from the creation of the fear in the community, from making sure that when I talk, everybody gets to listen. I always remember this one advocate's story. She taught 20-some years in our community, in the home community. Nobody gets domestic violence. Her husband comes in one day, talks about it, everybody's like, oh, we got domestic violence. Okay, let's get up and let's do something about it. That's what privilege looks like in my community. Is when I talk, people listen. When I said I was sexually assaulted or have experienced sexual abuse, like all those boys who've experienced and came out a couple years ago through the church, everybody started listening. But if it was women and girls coming out, people were tuned out. And if they were tuned in, they probably were blaming her for what happened. Right? That's what I'm talking about, the valuization of men and boys. So yes, we're all good fathers. And we don't get women. That's great. And we're respectable and we're nice and we're kind and we value women and girls. That's great. This is all great stuff and really good stuff for us as men to be able to claim and say, because our intentions mean well, right? And we're a really nice guy, you know, so we need to start paying attention and go further. And I think the best thing that I want to share with all of you in that is that in order to actually end domestic violence or any violence towards women and girls, is that we have to start with ourselves first. We have to. I didn't get to this place. I started out in training in law enforcement, finished my undergrad at Mankato in law enforcement, went to work at the county, in Hennepin County with correctional, with young folks, particularly young boys in the sex offender program. And after a while, and simultaneous to that, I started volunteering as a sexual violence advocate during that time, and a domestic violence advocate, okay, to learn people skills. That was my story this morning. And through that, I learned that I didn't need to save the survivors that were coming to see me. They didn't need me saving them. They were capable of doing that themselves. They were capable of staying safe by themselves, right? And so, in the end, it was really about, oh shit, I had to look in the mirror, and I had to see all pieces of me. And that's what we talk about to men. You have to see all parts of yourself, all the ugliness, all the things that you could potentially contribute to that causes the harm in society that allows for the climate of violence to happen. So here's a quote from the Men's Resource International report. Quote, after researching several successful male involvement programs worldwide, we realized that it was first necessary to ensure that men understood the root causes of violence from gender-specific lens, and their own role in maintaining gender norms and inequity before developing their engagement in prevention. So I had to learn how I participated in sexism, how I participated in homophobia, how I participated in silencing victims and survivors. I had to learn all those things, that the whistling, the vulgar language, the ways in which I talked about women's body parts in the locker rooms with my buddies, or over drinks with my friends and cousins, that was not good. It's all fun and joke, but what does it add to? It adds to the devaluation, into the hatred of women and girls, into the killing of women and girls, and to okaying and saying to my cousins and saying to other men, it is okay for you to kill, it is okay for you to rape, it is okay for you to do those things. That's what it adds to, right? Remember the low-bearing fruit that I was talking about? Those choices are always ever present. Those choices are ever present because of those conditions in our environment. So I had to learn to disrupt those things for myself. I had to start listening deeper. Okay? I always said there's 3 types of listening. I listen to when I'm being challenged, okay, and doing this work from women advocates and women leaders and the women survivors who've been coming and telling their stories. I had to listen to their stories. And then I had to listen to myself as I listened to those stories. And if I felt guilty, or if I felt ashamed, or if I felt some whatever that was coming up with myself, I had to make sure I took care of it. And I had to navigate it myself, right? Otherwise, I'd probably tune her out. I'd probably not be listening to her. Right? I had to listen to the stories of my grandma and my mom as well, in terms of how they experienced inequity and sexism growing up, and in the lives that they're currently living in as well too, and in the community, right? So starting to do all of that helped me unlayer and really think about my own senses of privilege as a male in community, and what is it that I can actually do. So I went from the place of trying to save everybody to the place of like, I'm just gonna save myself, and then to the place of like, oh, actually this is really healing, and that it was really about me trying to heal myself through this process. And that's what we try to create for men. And within the Men Masculine Folks Network, or at Man Forward, we create spaces where men can actually think about what it means to enhance their lives through the connection and through building brotherhood with other men. And that's what we've seen that has actually allowed for men to actually reduce and not choose the low-bearing fruit, is that if they can do their own self-examination and they can build support systems and support places with other men in their lives, and they can be more intimately connected to those men in their lives, they're less likely to choose violence. They're less likely to harm somebody or to go down the rabbit hole and not come back out, because there are other men in their lives that they're talking and processing about these things with, who are saying it's okay for you, as Jackson Katz says, to not wear the armor. It's okay for you to not wear the mask. By the way, if any of you haven't seen the title called The Mask You Live In, it's actually on YouTube. YouTube it. It's actually a pretty good video about some of what I'm talking about here too, if you haven't already seen it. But the self-examination is so vitally important, because then I had to learn. Because what community and family hadn't taught me was that they didn't teach me how to love other men. They didn't teach me to love myself. They didn't teach me how to express my values and how to express my feelings. They didn't teach me any of that. So in practicing healthy masculine in men, I needed to actually learn how to do those things. Right? Even gay men have to learn how to love other gay men in their loving relationships. Right? So that's the kind of things that I'm talking about. And even though some of us may know how to do it, we don't know how to do it here, and we don't know how to do it in practice, in our behaviors. Okay? Where we say, so when we talk to men, I kid you not, for those of you who've done domestic violence programming for men, you have to give men a feeling sheet. just as you teach young children what feelings are. That's how disconnected men are from feelings and what feelings are. And then where is that feeling living in your body? I don't actually know. That's too deep of a question at this moment, right? That's what I'm talking about. That's what we actually need. And it's not to make our men less men, or whatever the case may be. But it's actually to say, this is who we are as human beings, and as individuals, and as people. And we want to be obviously kind and loving, as the pastor had said in his invocation, to really be able to be loving. It means we have to be intentional as men. It means we have to be so self-aware. It means we have to think about every single decision that we make and how it impacts the lives of women and girls in our community and the people that we're actually in relationship with, right? So you can have the kindest man who can end up killing his wife, right? You've all seen the stories about, like, go ask the neighbor, because the neighbor will tell you how he is. And the neighbor's like, he was such a nice man. He was great. Couldn't believe he did that, right? That's what we're talking about, okay? We're not talking about the guys who are coming up the bush and are the psychopaths. We're not talking about those guys. Those guys are too few. Many of the ones who actually commit the harm are the ones who are sitting in this room with us, which is very scary to what some of us are saying. But that helps us build, I think, a different society, a different way of living, and a different community. If we could really think about, if these are our fathers, these are our brothers, these are our uncles, how do we actually build a different community with one another? How do we build different lives and different ways of being with one another? So as men as peacemakers, we really believe in that we're all connected. We really believe that if we can take the intention to build connections with our neighbors, to build connections in our own congregations and in our own communities with other men, we can probably reduce the violence that actually we see in community. Because if I'm connected to you, I'm concerned about you. If I have a connection to you and I see that you're actually not doing well, I may step in, or I might give you a phone call, or I'm going to check up on you, right? And if I see you doing something bad, I'm going to call you out on it. And I'm going to say that what you're doing probably will lead you down this path. Let's talk about it more. And I'll probably be able to get a group of other men to actually help intervene as well too. That's the kind of prevention work that we actually need to have happen. We need to start policing the behaviors that lead to the violence, and stop policing the way in which people get victimized and how victims show up and talk about their stories. And we need to start policing a lot of the consequences that happen if people don't play the gender roles that we believe they should play and act the way that they need to act if they're men. There's consequences, I know that, to young boys and men who don't behave and act in those rigid traditions of what it means to be a man. There's consequences to that. We need to stop policing that and start policing the kinds of behaviors that actually lead to violence. Or when we start seeing other men doing bad things, we need to start policing his behaviors so that it will stop reducing, or that it will reduce the violence that we actually see in the community, right? And it takes a lot of work. It's not easy, and I don't intend or think that all of a sudden we'll get there. What I learned over the years is that we also have to teach one another how to navigate violence when it actually happens in our own homes. Sitting on the domestic violence fatality review team in Hennepin County has taught me so much about that. Every single domestic violence homicide case that happens, somebody in the family knows about it. You know what they didn't have? They didn't have the resources and the tools to talk about it. Okay? They didn't have the resources and tools, language, words to talk about the violence that was happening. They didn't know how to navigate it. But if we can equip our community folks, not just men and boys, through their enhancing their lives and really being able to focus on their healing and giving them the tools to learn and to be expressive, but if we can give everybody the resources and tools to navigate that violence when it happens, to address it, to talk about it, and to name it, and to say, hey, we're watching you, then perhaps we can actually reduce the violence and be able to actually lower the number of people that we see dead every year because of domestic violence or sexual violence, right? So really over the years, that's what I've learned, that's what I've seen, and I think that at the end here, I want to share that so much of my work is about building love with men and having hope for men and building community with men. And through that is the prevention work, right? Through working with men is about prevention. And yet at the same time, I know that that alone isn't going to stop the violence. That alone isn't going to be enough. Because to the points made earlier, it's going to take all of us, and it means we all have to stop saying boys will be boys. We all have to stop. Let him pay, he's a man. Let him be the man today. No, those things don't work, right? That kind of policing of gender roles and rigidity into the gender roles and for people to play, that's not going to help. Okay? So there's something that we can each do, and I know that's why you're all here, and I know that's what you all want to do, is really think about that. And it's a lot of work. It's not easy work. Been doing this for close to 20 years, and I'm still here. I have some gray hair in my head, yeah. I'm going bald. But I find a lot of joy in it. Because when I get to be able to be in front of communities like this, in front of people who are passionate, who are motivated, like Kelly, who have just got the award, it brings me some hope that we're going to actually get through this, right? And that in someday, at some point, the violence will actually end, right? But it's in our stories and it's in how we connect with one another that's going to give us some hope and some joy and some spaciousness to actually be able to work through and walk through some of the sombering effects and some of the deaths that we'll probably be witnessing along the way. So, care for yourselves, care for your community members, care for your neighbor, be vigilant about the behaviors of men and boys, and for the men in the room, thank you for coming, and really start working on being more attentive and awareness. If you don't know where to start, look in the mirror. Okay, so thank you for coming, and thank you for listening to my talk.
As we close, please take some time as you're leaving. Obviously, we have the clothesline project there, and there's also tables out in the entryway. Please look at those. Those are different community services in our area that you can be a part of. UCAN is obviously the paperwork in front of you. There's stuff in the back how to join our group. It does say on the meet the second Tuesdays at Wednesday Bank. We're hoping to get back in person, but right now we're meeting via Zoom. But if you have interest, find somebody associated with it or go to the website and there's an email address on there. We'd love to have you. We'll start tomorrow building towards this event next year. Along with those who took part in the stand event last night, thank you for those. That's a building and growing event that has changed over the last few years, and we thank you for those people as well. If there's nothing else, we'll let you go back to your day. Again, thank you for your time.